Mr. LaLota from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to say thanks to our witnesses for being here, especially to you, Ms. Kiesling, for having the courage to share your story. I'm the father of 3 wonderful daughters, and I couldn't imagine what you've gone through, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. Hopefully it provides us the perspective and the courage as well to tackle this problem as well. I represent a suburban district on Long Island. We're about 2,000 miles north of the southern border, but because of the country's open borders and my state's sanctuary city policies, New York State has too become a border state. But just this past week, I had the opportunity to visit the border down in El Paso to witness firsthand what is going on with the 1.2 million gotaways and the 100,000 fentanyl poisons that we've had over the past year. 1.2 million gotaways. That's more people than 8 different states. And the reality is our federal government has no idea where these people are. But what we do know is that 100,000 people died from fentanyl poisonings last year, and that's 250 per day, the equivalent of a commercial airliner crashing every day. And we know that that fentanyl is being made in China and being smuggled across the U.S.-Mexico border. And Sheriff Lamb, you noted that the impact of the border crisis isn't just in your state, isn't just in the United States border states, but across the United States. And in my home county of Suffolk, like I said, 2,000 miles north of the southern border, we saw recently we saw 400 deaths due to fentanyl poisoning. And I think that we all agree that more must be done to stop these illegal substances from entering our communities. So my question is to you, Sheriff, what resources do you need to find and seize the illegal drugs that are coming across our borders so that we can best fight this scourge that is killing so many Americans? And what impact, if any, in your opinion, would a wall or a fence or other physical barrier do to help you do your job, sir?
I'll answer the second thing first. The wall absolutely works. I mean, I have a wall around my house. It's not stopping anybody, but it's certainly deterring them from coming into my yard. It is a piece of border security. We got to put that together with the right amount of personnel, the right equipment. All of that works together to do it. My county will always have a problem because we have an Indian reservation that actually goes into Mexico. They won't build a wall there. So even in the good times, we still have people coming through. What we could do is continue to fund or increase the funding for Stone Garden. It gives us the ability to really help Border Patrol. And I would love to see a lot more equipment available for local law enforcement to be able to do it. For us, it's still going out and doing it the old-fashioned way, and that's traffic stops and getting people that are trying to be trafficked through the deserts, the cartels' activities through there.
Can you speak, Sheriff, at all to any of the technology that you could use to help do that job better, sir?
Absolutely, thank you, sir. I would love to have a drone that was a military type drone because the expense, I need one that flies 50 to 100 miles that we can monitor our desert areas. Because within the desert areas south of my county is where the cartels are pushing people who have criminal records. I don't know if most people know, in the last year, I think it's the last year, even if it was 2 years, there's been over 40,000 people apprehended that had criminal convictions here in America for crimes, and that they are also wanted by law enforcement. So think about the amount of people that are getting by us that that are actually criminals already.
And thank you for your dedication to this issue, Sheriff. It matters to your county, but it matters way north in my county as well. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Magaziner from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Chairman. And if you'll indulge me, this is my first time speaking on this committee, so I'm going to just speak for a moment at a high level. My hope is that this committee will work together on a bipartisan basis to enact smart policies to protect Americans against anyone who would do us harm, including by improving our security at our borders and points of entry. Everyone on this committee is going to have a decision to make, whether we are going to work together to get things done, or if we're here for partisan grandstanding. This committee, as I understand it, has a reputation for being one of the more bipartisan committees in Congress historically, where members do work across the aisle in the interest of protecting the safety of the American people, and I hope that that'll continue. That's one of the reasons that I chose to join this committee as a freshman. It's disappointing to me that already I hear not all, not most, but a few members using their time to take shots at the other side or the president or other political figures instead of having a productive conversation about solutions, and I hope that will not be the tone going forward. Because there are plenty of things that we can do to improve safety and security at the border that I think we can all agree on. We should all agree on securing the border and ports of entry by improving technology, by making sure there are adequate resources available, by finding ways to collaborate across agencies and with friendly nations to crack down on human trafficking, drug smuggling, and cartel activity, making the asylum process more efficient so that those who are doing the right thing and looking to do the process the right way don't run into a wall of unnecessary red tape and delays, and addressing the root causes of migration that are causing the vast majority of people to come here. We also have a real and pressing crisis with the opioid epidemic, and particularly fentanyl, that is ravaging our country, and we should attack that problem where it exists. I'm glad that there's been discussion today about the fact that over the last couple of years, more than 90% of fentanyl seizures have occurred at legal ports of entry, with American citizens, unfortunately, making up more than 80% of those apprehended. I don't say that to point fingers at anyone. I just say that to make sure that we focus our time and attention on where the problems are most severe so that we can save the most lives. So we need to do everything that we can to ensure that we stop fentanyl and other drug trafficking by employing the technology and the manpower where it's needed the most. And at the same time, we can't lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of migrants who are coming here seeking entry to the United States at the southern border are doing so because they are fleeing violence and persecution. These are human beings who are running away from something in the vast majority of cases, and they deserve to be treated with humanity and respect. Those are our national values. So I hope as a committee, we will endeavor to work together in a sober way to address these and the other challenges that our homeland faces. I hope that going forward, we will not lose sight of the fact that the intelligence community has been clear that domestic extremism is one of our other most serious threats. Over the last 3 years, 80 Americans have been killed by violence motivated by domestic extremism, with white supremacy and anti-government extremism being among the most common motivating factors. That we need to redouble our efforts to strengthen our infrastructure and our cybersecurity. We just saw in the last few weeks reports of Vladimir Putin's regime attempting to shut down the electric grids and LNG facilities through cyber attacks in this country in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine a year ago. That is a sobering reminder of how much damage can be done to our country if we let our guard down. So this work is important. We owe it to the American people to focus on all of the threats to the homeland, including those at the southern border. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to do just that. Just expanding on the fentanyl crisis, Dr. Beyer, I would ask you once again, in your judgment, where is the biggest source of the problem from a homeland security point of view, and what can we do as a committee on a bipartisan basis to stop the flow of these deadly substances into our country?
Well, the heart of the problem is at the ports of entry, and we know this from a lot of different lines of evidence. First of all, we have a very large sample size of people who've been interdicted crossing illegally, and those people are bringing hardly anything fentanyl-wise into the country. The other thing to look at is it's not that Border Patrol cannot interdict drug traffickers. For example, marijuana, 75% of marijuana arrests or seizures occur between ports of entry, and that's because the drug is too bulky in most cases to bring it through the ports. DEA's own investigations have found that it comes through ports of entry. They testified the vast majority come through legal ports of entry. And we also know because the cartels themselves are telling us this because they're warring over control of the ports of entry. They would not be fighting a war over the control of a port of entry if it was not the most valuable place for drugs to enter the country.
Gentleman yields back, and I now recognize Mr. Bekeen of Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for the impassioned plea to change a system that is leading to the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans. As we've talked about today, this is something that's impacting all of us. I've got a young adult that I was close to many years ago. He was actually a part of my church youth group, and I got word 2 weeks ago that he had through an addiction, a sad addiction. I've not been around this young man for years. He had actually overdosed 2 weeks ago. And within, a text message exchange of condolences to his father, the father's response was, nobody should have to go through this. And so, Ms. Kiesling, nobody should have to go through what you're experiencing. In 2021, there were 299 fentanyl overdose deaths in my state of Oklahoma. In 2018, that figure was only 39, to your point earlier. That's a staggering, almost 700% increase. And we know it's attributed to what's happening at the southern border. Just this month, an illegal alien pled guilty for an illegal drug operation in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with 3,500 grams of fentanyl powder, 1,300 grams of fentanyl pills were discovered from his home. And that's enough to kill all the residents of Oklahoma City, 650,000 people. 2 weeks ago, a young man, as I described, that I was close to years ago, passed away. It hits home. In addition to that, in my district, in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, there was a 21-year-old named Zach Sanders experimenting with pills, took a pill laced with fentanyl, and he died of a drug overdose in January of 21. And after his death, his mother sponsored a billboard in that city, in Bartlesville, with a photo of Zach and the words that said, "Check your pills, fentanyl kills." What's happening is astounding. Bartlesville Police Department, the city had 12 overdose cases in 2021, and in just the first 10 months of 2022, they had 53 confirmed overdose cases. And we know by the national statistics, the majority of deaths, 18 to 45 years of age, is fentanyl, and the climb of overdoses in correlation to fentanyl. I'm going to hold up a graphic here. It's a penny, and Sheriff Lamb, this is a question to you. From what we know, it's 2 milligrams, which is demonstrated here, of fentanyl sized against the penny. That's technically a lethal dose, enough to kill. And we know that last year, 13,000 pounds of fentanyl was seized in 2023. That's enough to kill 333 million Americans 9 times over. So, Sheriff Lamb, my question to you is your estimation, describing to Ms. Kiesling's point, your children were thinking it's Percocet and ended up being fentanyl. What percentage of what you're seeing from your experience, boots on the ground, is coming from the cartel of this problem?
100%, sir. 100% is coming from the cartels. And this is also, the fentanyl, it doesn't take much at all. They're putting it in everything. They're putting it in the cocaine, the heroin, the marijuana. They're putting it in everything. And I wanted to mention the xylazine, and I hope I could take just 1 second.
Hey, it's a horse tranquilizer, right?
It's a horse tranquilizer.
I grew up in the horse industry. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this.
It's not approved for human use. Here's what is alarming. It is a non-opioid, which means that naloxone and Narcan will be ineffective on it. The Phoenix Fire Department is starting to see it. Other states' departments are starting to see it. So the cartels are starting to add xylazine into the fentanyl, and it will be impervious to the Narcan or the naloxone that we often administer to each other and to other people who are suffering from a poisoning of fentanyl.
So the cartel's running the gamut. And so, as the colleague said earlier, you agreed that we need to see them as a terrorist organization. And in terms of seeing them as a terrorist organization, are they not the new form of organized crime in America, the new mob that we know, as I was on the border last week, and right across from the suburbs of El Paso, that we're hearing about operational citywide control by the cartel? Why should we not be concerned that is moving into America like the mob was able to take hold of control of areas in the United States?
Mr. Brecken, we should be concerned as Americans. That violence will spill over. It has spilled over, and it will continue to spill over into America. It'll affect American lives. I mean, the fentanyl already is. The DEA, I forgot to tell you, the DEA is now saying that 75% of the fentanyl doses they're finding are lethal doses. That's a staggering number, and it's going to affect a lot of American lives.
And then quickly, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Beer, do you think we have an invasion at our southern border?
There's certainly a problem at our southern border, yes.
Would you define it as an invasion?
No, not under our Constitution. Constitutionally, an invasion is a military action by a foreign government.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just say Article 4, Section 4 guarantees to every state a republican form of government and protect those states against an invasion. So the witness was very careful in knowing that I probably knew the Constitution and the way he answered that question.
And James Madison agrees with that definition as well. He wrote about what constitutes an invasion under our Constitution as well.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank our witnesses, all of them. Thank you very much for being here, especially Ms. Kiesling. I'm, of course, like everyone on the committee, I'm very sorry for your loss. I do want to start just my remarks by just making something just crystal clear. Democrats care about human trafficking and taking it on. We care about a safe and secure border. We agree that we need to prosecute and take on drug cartels. And we deeply care about the fentanyl crisis, which we know is happening. It's a serious issue taking on and really causing damage to communities across the country. But in listening to some of our colleagues here today, it's also pretty apparent that we also care about something that many of our Republican colleagues do not care about, and that's an orderly and humane immigration system. Now, I am an immigrant myself. I came to the U.S. As a young child, and I became a U.S. citizen in my early 20s. And I benefited from the last time our country actually passed an immigration reform system, which was actually over 35 years ago. And in fact, it was Ronald Reagan, a Republican president, who signed that bill that allowed me and my family to become U.S. citizens. So I appreciate that. I'm also a small group of members of Congress that are immigrants, and certainly on this committee. I like to say that becoming a U.S. citizen was the proudest day of my life. I know firsthand that immigrants like myself and like my mom, who cleaned houses and worked in clinics, cleaning clinics, are patriotic Americans. I consider myself an American patriot, and I also know that real patriotism, American patriotism, is actually about helping people. We also know that folks that are coming to our country are seeking help. Many are desperate. They're coming because in the tradition of America, this is a place where we afford the American dream to so many from across this world. And we are a nation of immigrants. And so these broad attacks that we're hearing today on immigrants today, I believe, is un-American. Immigrants are not all drug dealers, that some would suggest. And we also, as immigrants, agree that, of course, we need to secure our borders and have an orderly process at our border. And we want to work with our colleagues to also understand that our ports of entry are also places where fentanyl is clearly coming in huge numbers. But we also need to have conversations around drug treatment programs, mental health care, and access to care, none of which is happening today at this committee. And what I don't want to do is conflate asylum seekers with the flow of drugs. Mr. Beer, I want to thank you for your work that you've done on this topic, and I would ask you to remind us once again what the percentage is of all the folks that are arrested by Border Patrol possessing fentanyl. What is actually that percentage?
0.02%.
So not even 1%. Correct, sir?
Way less than 1%, less than 0.1%.
And I think that's an important point because you wouldn't know that by hearing from so many of my colleagues here, particularly on the other side of the aisle at this committee. And is it also true that 91% of drug seizures at checkpoints are from U.S. citizens?
That's right.
So contrary to the myth that is being, I think, proposed today by the chairman and so many others, a vast majority of the fentanyl entering the U.S. is actually by U.S. citizens at legal ports of entry. Is that not true?
That's right.
So, and Mr. Beer, consistent with your own research, I believe immigrants are also less likely to commit crimes in this country. Isn't that also true?
That's right. According to the Census Bureau, immigrants, both legal and illegal immigrants, are half as likely to end up behind bars and convicted of crimes in this country than U.S.-born residents.
And it's pretty clear that just listening to some of our colleagues today, you wouldn't know any of those facts to be true. All of that is actually true. It's documented. And I think it's important to continue to raise those, not just in this committee, but across the country. So thank you, sir. I want to note that the Biden administration has also fought for resources to increase a secure border. As we know this, to modernize our infrastructure, technology, support border agents, improve screening at our legal ports of entry. In fact, as we know, the infrastructure bill included $430 million for customs and border protection, of which most Republicans in Congress voted against. And so I think it's important that at this moment we work together to deploy these resources. And today I especially find it troubling that my colleagues are willing to discuss fentanyl at the border, but we don't have witnesses discussing all these treatment programs, drug addiction programs, or ways to help people that are suffering or that have or that need mental health support. This conversation in front of us in this committee is broken and wrong. The American people are being misled by many members of this committee, and in the process are demonizing vulnerable people, including immigrants across this country. I hope we can work together to build a just and humane immigration system in our country, one that respects asylum seekers. I hope that we can get serious about addiction and universal health care. But unfortunately, those are not the conversations that we're having here today. I'm hopeful at the next committee, at the next meeting that we have, that we're not using this committee for political stunts and for misinformation. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.